What's up, guys? This is Nick from Supermoon Studios. Today we're going to be taking a look at and going over some intro to sound design stuff. And before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe this video. We're really trying to branch out and get our name out there. Please hashtag Supermoon Studios on Twitter and Instagram. Please hashtag create everything. If you can share our ad around, that'd be amazing. There's a link in the description for that. And with that, let's get started. So basically, to get started, we could talk about the history of sound design. Sound really came about as a technology out of necessity for the time period, and surprisingly, it wasn't a French invention. Although film was created by the Lumiere brothers over across the sea in France there, we actually invented sound for cameras. Sound came from a corporation called Vitaphone. It was a combination of kind of a few of America's big top corporations at the time, RCA, Western Electric, AT&T, and Warner Brothers. They kind of all came together, and a few of them worked out some partnerships, and they created Vitaphone, which really created the first sound recorder for cameras and the first sound system for playback. So basically, the original sound systems looked just like a big phonograph coming off the side of a film projector. So if you were in the audience, that's what you would be watching, is it would be coming off of a film projector, and someone up in the booth would have to synchronize that sound and that music to the film itself while the phonograph was playing and the film projector was also playing separately. That was of course rectified later after the soundtrack was added to the actual celluloid film strip itself. That's how they actually figured out that synchronization problem, is they added a separate track on either side of the film strip that would read the soundtrack and the music while the film played, so you wouldn't lose any loss of synchronization or amplification when you were trying to listen to your productions and watch your playback. And one of the biggest problems of this early era of sound film was that the sound recording equipment that they used during these productions was actually very, very big, very clunky, and very noisy. So you would end up picking up a lot of that extra noise on the microphone itself while you were filming. So to rectify this, film studios actually would put them in what was called a blimp, where you would put all of your sound recording in basically a separate room, and you would have your microphone be on your sound stage with your actors, while your recording equipment would be kind of somewhere else where it would be hooked up to, just so you didn't catch that extra noise in the background. And this kind of continued for a while until someone realized you could take that microphone and put it on a stand and kind of put it anywhere. So that was the kind of the idea behind that, is getting all of this noisy sound equipment off the set so all you heard were your actors' performances. A lot of these problems are talked about in 1952's Singing in the Rain, where they talk about creating one of the first musicals in film, and a lot of this stuff is actually readdressed and kind of thrown back to during that film as kind of a reflection on how far they had come using sound within the industry at that time. And in this way, these sound cameras kind of counteracted all of this fluidity and all of the skills that these silent filmmakers had built up over the past 30 years, because all of a sudden they couldn't move their camera anymore because they needed to capture that audio that was really just attached right onto the camera. And of course, in addition to this, other than just the technological problems that they faced, a lot of early sound filmmakers actually faced a lot of difficulties with their actors, because a lot of silent film actors weren't really up to the task of acting on screen, and sometimes their voices really just didn't translate well through a microphone. A lot of the times they didn't sound how they looked. So this threw a huge monkey wrench in the situation where their whole star category kind of went out the window, because a lot of those people didn't translate very well to sound film. So once the silent film era was over, there really became this power vacuum in Hollywood where they needed these actors who could speak on screen and act on screen as well. And in this way, even writers had some problems transferring from silent film to sound film, because a lot of them weren't writing dialogue before this. They were just writing gags or visual slapstick comedies or stuff like that. Little tiny vignettes and scenes that didn't need dialogue. It didn't really need a lot of structure. So they actually started bringing in authors from fiction, literary authors, to try and kind of help with the workload there, so that Hollywood could keep running and they could have dialogue that didn't sound clunky and like it was written by someone who had never done it before. And in this way, this is really when acting kind of started to get good back then. We had spent kind of 30 years with physical motions and body language, so now we were moving into dialogue and facial expressions and everything like that. And so in this way, a lot of really old offensive stereotypes started disappearing a little bit more as we started moving through the 20th century. A lot of wisecracking Italian mobster bad guys started disappearing around this time, and they were only focused in their specific genre. Same with a lot of anti-Semitic jokes and a lot of things that they would use to pick on the Jewish community. Those started fading away from the big screen, and basically overall things became a little bit more progressive and just a little bit more open in the Hollywood system. And that of course continues all the way to today. As we make more technological advances, the industry becomes a little bit more opening and accepting of outsiders. Also, another fun fact, the first ever film that was credited with having sound and being called a talkie even was The Jazz Singer, which came out in 1927. But actually, that was the second movie to come out with sound. The first one was kind of a series of shorts that were put out by Warner Brothers, and they had worked on a full feature film called Don Juan, which came out in 1926. So about a year prior, there was some sound on screen before The Jazz Singer. Also, another fun fact I found in my research, the Jazz Singer's dialogue portions on screen actually came out of necessity because apparently the actor just wouldn't calm down on set and kept talking in between takes, so they had to kind of shoehorn in some dialogue before these musical numbers. So again, with new technology, new practices, and new genres started popping up within the industry. We started having kind of screwball comedies that were based around a lot of dialogue in a scene. We started having a lot more intimate romance films where people could actually express their feelings on camera now because we could hear them. And then of course we got musicals, which became a huge part of the 20th century film landscape. Musicals were everywhere at the time. It allowed for a lot of musicians to break into this Hollywood sector of the industry where they would be able to have their music featured and star on screen depending on if they were comfortable or not. And this really just became a new revolution for the entire film industry because now we had kind of two things to look at. We didn't just have visuals anymore, we had audio as well, and that really brought film to the place it is today. So going off of all that, I know that's a lot of information, that's a lot of stuff that I learned in film school and that I actually just briefed myself online before I did this video, but that's basically the rough history of film. It came out of necessity from people wanting to tell deeper stories. It came from really big clunky technology, and then it was streamlined down and baked right into the film strip itself, so no one had to worry about synchronization issues anymore. And sound recording just got better and better as it went, and in turn the cinematography was allowed to kind of return back to its more skillful state because the microphone wasn't attached to the camera anymore. So now we kind of had two sectors of the industry working together trying to get both things off the ground. If you've taken film classes or been in film school, or even if you haven't, you've probably heard that film is around 50% visual, 50% audio when it comes to the medium itself. If you're taking film classes or you're in film school or you've seen the Pony Smasher video, you've probably heard your professor say something a little bit cheekier like film is actually more 20% video and about 80% audio. And that's just because to bring you into this atmosphere of this cinematic world, you really need these audio cues and you need this extra sense that's also being heightened while you're watching it. And that just kind of adds to the depth of the production. And a lot of people say if your sound is bad in your film is bad. It doesn't matter how good your film looks. Now, I'm here to tell you guys that film is basically 100% audio and 100% film. And I know that doesn't add up and it doesn't make sense, but if you look at it this way, not a lot of people have visual mediums that they pay attention to without an outside auditorial experience. You could talk about art museums where you go and look at photographs and paintings, but those are still images. There's not a lot of video productions that you watch that are completely silent. Even original silent films figured out pretty fast that you needed some sort of musical company in the background to match what you were watching on screen, or else people just start to tune out because they don't really know what they're looking at anymore. Audio adds context and it adds a lot of depth to a situation and to a scene, and that's something that again, they figured out pretty early on. Even today, if you look at our media landscape today, podcasts make up a huge portion of the media industry now. Podcasts are a huge moneymaker right now, and that's a purely audio-based industry, and so is music as well. We don't really have a lot of purely visually based forms of media in our culture, especially when it's moving pictures like this, when it's a movie, when it's a film. So in my opinion, you can get a lot more out of a film by just listening to it. Of course, this isn't touching upon all the advancements we made for people with hearing impairments in the United States and around the world. Subtitles are great, of course. I'm not bashing anything like that, but I'd say for the average American, if you a lot of people will even put stuff on in the background to listen to, but not a lot of people will put a video production on just to watch it and not to listen to it. A lot of people tend to tune out if they're not immediately being stimulated. So that's why, in my opinion, audio is literally the most important thing. That's what's actually bringing you into this production. And especially in a lot of filmmaking practices, people will put whatever they want on screen. As long as you have something to keep you grounded, you'll be able to kind of follow along and know what's happening. You can frame all your shots completely perfectly, but if you have bad audio, it's still going to sound and look like a middle school production. It's how our brains interpret information. We interpret more than one sense at one time. And that's why, like I said, a lot of people will throw a podcast or music on in the background and do something else. No one's really putting on silent videos and watching those all the way through. Even YouTube figured out to add a little sound button to their rollover thumbnails because people get interested and they want to hear what's going on. So basically, if you learn it, it's around 50% audio, 50% visual. If you learn it from a film school professor, you're probably going to learn that it's about 80% sound, 20% video. And if you learn it from us, it's about 100% audio, and just make sure your video looks good. Really, you make sure that your sound design, your soundtrack fits what's going on screen, and you can make anything. You can make bad, old school looking grainy VHS videos. As long as the audio matches the style and sounds good, people are going to understand what you're trying to do. So going off of that, you guys might be asking at this point, where do I start? You haven't really even talked about doing sound design. You just gave me a bunch of random facts and some history. So basically, I'm going to tell you where we start. Whenever I start scoring or putting sound design to one of our short films, I look at what I need for background noise immediately. That's, of course, the first thing you have to learn is that there has to be extra noise in the background. Life isn't silent, especially when you're in public. So you need some kind of background track to keep your character grounded and to bring the atmosphere of the scene to life. If your character is at a marketplace, you need some marketplace sounds in the background. You need people selling to each other. You need fruits falling, stuff dropping, people moving boxes. You need commotion in the background because that's how it works at a marketplace. If you have a character walking down a marketplace and there's clearly people there conducting business, but you don't hear anything, it's going to seem out of place and it's going to seem fake, and it's not going to seem like your character is in this real place because you're not hearing these sounds that he would be hearing, he or she would be hearing. So that's really where I start. I start with background noise. I look in the screen and see what's on screen and what I can bring to life in that scene. Even if it's just someone dropping a cup in the background, if it's on screen, you have to put a noise there, because otherwise, why is it on screen? That's the whole point of filmmaking, is your frames need to be deliberate, and if your frames are deliberate, it'll make scoring your productions later all that much easier, because you won't have random stuff floating around the background that's either not making noise or making too much noise. And you need a lot of stuff to kind of distract your audience from your production itself, because otherwise they're going to start figuring out it's a movie. If they're not drawn into that world and they're not immersed in what you're showing them, they're going to know it's a movie and they're going to turn it off and watch something better. That's how sound design works. You got to look in your screen. You need to see what's moving around. You need to see what's making noise or what should be making noise or what's making noise and shouldn't be making noise. And you have to go through and tweak what's happening there. So a great example of that is from a scene we did over the summer that we're going to take a look at in a second. But before we get there, let's just talk about a few more things. Right off the bat, you need your background noise in the background. You need to show what's on screen, whether it's making noise or whether it's not. It needs to be there deliberately. Now, we can also talk about music, which has to kind of complement and flow through your scene. That's probably going to be a whole separate video. We'll talk about soundtracking, we'll talk about scoring a scene, we'll talk about equilibrium and kind of pacing in your music, and all around we'll just go through all that in a different video. But music is very important for mood and tone and scene and all of that stuff, because it really gives you, the audience, the feeling that the filmmakers are trying to present to you. But again, we'll talk about that in a separate video, because that's going to be kind of a long conversation. Going back to what's on screen, let's talk about diegetic versus non-diegetic sound right now. So diegetic sound is going to be everything that is on screen in your production. Like I said, if someone drops a water bottle in the background and it makes a noise when it hits the ground, that is diegetic sound. It's everything that your character would be able to perceive in the film itself. It's the car driving by him. It's the music on at the grocery store. If it's on at the grocery store, it's again, it's someone dropping a vase and it shattering into a million pieces. That is diegetic sound. Non-diegetic sound is everything that you're putting into the production as a filmmaker. So background music, if we have a soundtrack on in the background while our character is walking down the street, that's non-diegetic sound. If he has stuff going on in his head that we're hearing or we're experiencing with him, that's also non-diegetic sound. That's stuff that you wouldn't actually hear in the scene if you were standing right next to your character. So, using diegetic sound to score everything that's on screen, and then using non-diegetic sound to bring all of that stuff to life with music and extra sound effects and some extra sound design and environmental design there, that's really where you get this meshed together sound design, soundscape, soundtrack even. You get this full block of sound and audio for a scene where you'll have possibly characters talking, background noise going, birds chirping, possibly if it's raining you'll have rain sounds, and then on top of that you might have some mood music and you might have some sound effects for what's going on with the character so we can get in his head a little bit, and you might have some flashbacks or some voiceovers or whatever the scene needs. But that's how those two kind of work together to bring your scene to life. Stuff that's on screen, stuff that's not on screen. And you as a filmmaker really have to decide what your scene needs to bring it fully to life. And the most important part of that is just layering your sound design, of course. There's been a few instances where I put a sound effect in or I put something into a production and it worked a little bit, but it wasn't quite there yet. So I had to find another sound that complemented it and smush them together and put them in and layer everything and make sure, you know, it echoes correctly and it works correctly in the scene, and just making sure that everything is full and complete. And that's really where this layering process comes in. So again, we'll talk about it in a little bit in our example, but in one of our productions we did last year, there's several layers at the end of the production that's really just me making noise, and it just needed extra noise, it needed some extra sound effects for the scene, and we didn't have it from our filmmaking process, so I basically just sat at my microphone, made a bunch of noises, and then layered them all into the scene, and bing bang boom, it's done. It's got all the noises it needs, and it's completely cohesive and put together. So that's something that, again, is very important, using kind of everything you have, putting everything together with layers of diegetic sound and non-diegetic sound. There can never be too much noise. If you're looking at a scene and it seems empty, it's probably because it's missing some sound. That's the first thing you should look for. If you're watching your stuff and it seems empty, it's probably because it needs more sound. So with that, let's just take a look at some of these examples I've been talking about, and we'll come back and kind of wrap it up from there. So we're just going to take a look at that scene from up north real quick, and I'm just going to point some stuff out for you guys. So starting right off, you can hear some of the bird noises in the background. We can hear Tyler as he gets into the booth, so I didn't really need to add anything for that. It's also kind of a silent scene as well. When she drops that water bottle down, I amplified the sound effect there so you could hear it on screen, because you really couldn't hear it from the audio itself. So that's an example right there.
You all set over here? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. Look like you've seen a ghost.
No. Not yet, at least.
Well, can I get you any dessert, maybe? The chocolate cake here is to die for. It's my absolute favorite.
So I'm just going to pause here to talk for a second. We talked a lot about this stuff in our year in review video. If you guys didn't see that, the card should be popping up right now for it. Please go check that out. We spent a lot of time on it. We spent a ton of time on these short productions last year. Quarantine was really hard for everyone, and being able to kind of create while we were stuck inside was kind of a huge liberating feeling for us. So we're really proud of what we were able to get done last year. Please check out that video. But I just want to point out a few things here. Right now, there's only a few tracks going, and as far as you can tell, the scene is a little bit fuller for it. We have the background birds chirping in the background. We just have the dialogue track going. I added some more ambient sound effect, a busy road going by next door, but a lot of that is tuned out until we actually see the cars on screen, because otherwise it's just distracting and we don't really know why we're hearing it. So that's another thing to make sure you're always paying attention to. It's your job to make sure that no one's hearing that when nothing's happening. So a lot of these sounds I did have to cut up and kind of make sure they were in the right place. I had to make sure you could always hear the dialogue, which was a little rough because we were by the road. We'll talk about cleaning up and mixing dialogue in a separate video as well, because that's going to be a whole thing to go through as well. There's a whole process behind that. Then, like I said, on top of that, every time you see one of these cars drive by in the background, we'll play it for this.
I think I'll just take the check.
Oh, come on. It looks like you've had
When
a
you
tough
see
day.
that truck go by in the background, I put a car noise there. I made
You're
sure
not
that
around here, are
the
you?
audience could hear that there were these cars passing
guess
by.
that.
because,
plate.
like I said, you have to
Yeah.
sound what's on your screen.
Yeah,
You have to
we-
make sure that everything's coming to life the
that's
right
so
way.
cool.
And you have
We
to
don't
make
get a lot
sure
of your
that
folk around here.
everything on screen is
family
reacting
or-
appropriately,
Yeah,
or else it
something
seems
like
faked
that.
and it doesn't seem
Just
real.
have to get out,
So that's why
nice
this scene
long
took
drive,
particularly
don't
long,
have
because I had to pinpoint
hardly
exactly when
there's
those
some things,
when those
you know?
sounds needed to be,
So
and exactly
neat.
how loud,
I've
how
always
far
wanted to
away, how
travel
fast they needed to be.
Just get in the
I had
car
to tune
and
them
drive
perfectly
and
to the
drive.
scene, and I had to layer them all
Not
in.
as glamorous as it sounds.
So in this scene alone, it's got background music, it's got dialogue, it's got diegetic sound, it's got layers. It doesn't have music, and it doesn't really have any non-diegetic sound, because everything that's happening is on screen here. And that's really just a personal choice, because this film itself, we were kind of stuck in Tyler's head the whole short, and I wanted to kind of bring us back into reality. This whole sound design was really just to bring that place to life. And like I said, that's just all stuff you can do by yourself, really. So next up, real quick, I do just want to show you guys a little bit of Frigid. This shows a lot more layering in the ending here. This is kind of what I was talking about before. So as you can see here, this is all original music I made. That would be non-diegetic sound added in after the fact. And writing that was really just matching the mood and the mystery of the scene. That lever right there of him opening the lid of the freezer, that was a sound effect. All of this fire is a sound effect. And that's why I just wanted to kind of show you guys this real quick, because all of those are different layers, different audio layers in the Final Cut library of just me. I'm just making noise there. This entire ending sequence is just me. I'm screaming, I'm laughing, I'm yelling, I'm pleading and stuff like that. I did that all into one microphone. I mixed it all together. I pitched some stuff up higher, I pitched some stuff up lower, I slowed some stuff down, I sped some stuff up, and I just kind of started Lego blocking. I started layering everything together. I made sure that it felt like this wasn't just a single person. It felt like a bunch of people at once, and that's kind of the beauty of digital technology. And again, this layering and this whole idea of sound design is that you can take extra sounds and smush them together and make them sound like something new. So like I said, that's really why I just wanted to show you guys this was basically how far you can go with layering your sound. So this, again, was just me and a bunch of different layers and a bunch of music layers and a bunch of different ambient layers to add some more sound and some fire sound effects and some laughing and some tweaking and all that. So in this scene, because this was kind of a silent film, we had a lot of non-diegetic sound in this film, and this is all extra sound effects I added in after. Basically, in the actual scene, this is just my buddy John opening a freezer. One last example we could take a look at here is from Rascals, which was my final project from college. This whole scene, we weren't able to use any of the audio because where we filmed it, there was a band practice going on in the other room, so none of this audio is from the actual shoot. So I went back and recorded all of these sounds and sound effects by myself to then layer in after into this scene so that it had some diegetic sound to it. It didn't have any of the sound when we first filmed it. All of this moving around, me falling on the ground, even me gasping for air. None of that stuff was actually filmed on set. I filmed it separately and then added it all in later. So again, if you have bad sound, you can do something about it. You can mix it, you can tweak it, you can re-record it, you can ADR it. There's always something you can do. So let's just take a look at this scene real quick. So like I said, other than that last sound effect there at the end of that scene, All of that stuff was recorded after the fact. There was no sound in this scene itself when we filmed it. There was band practice going on in the background, so all the audio was actually unusable from that scene. So like I said, I just kind of went back with a microphone and my camera. I threw myself into the cabinet a few times. I unzipped and zipped up my backpack a few times. I put it on, I took it off. I whacked the towel around to get some more sound effects. I recorded all those by myself, and I layered them all in later. So again, we're looking at the scene. There's layers in it. There's some background noise in it. There's a little bit of panting from my mouth. I don't know if you'd call that dialogue. And there's some non-diegetic sound at the end. So this is, again, a very simple scene, just a few shots, but layering all that sound design in gives it an atmosphere. And it really helps pull you back into the scene, because if those sounds weren't there, you wouldn't believe it. And we've already talked about When a Black Man Walks Home several times now. It's been in our behind the scenes video, it was in our year in review video. There's a lot of stuff I did in that as well. When they're outside in the street, a lot of extra sounds are happening in the background, so please leave a comment down below if you guys do want us to take a look at that for sound design. We'd love to make an extra video going over kind of the sound design and cinematography of When a Black Man Walks Home. So if you guys want that, please let us know. I know not a lot of people let us know if they want anything, but either way. So yeah, so today we talked about the history of sound design, we talked about the golden rule of sound design, we talked a lot about layering, background noises, we talked about diegetic and non-diegetic sound, we talked about a lot of sound design here. So really, the big takeaway of this, layer your sound, make sure there's stuff going on in the background if there needs to be. Make sure you're not overlaying your productions with sound effects or music that doesn't need to be there. Make sure you're reading your scene and seeing what actually needs sound on scene. There's a very easy way you can practice this. Just go outside and film stuff. Go outside and film what's happening around you, and you can kind of guess and check what's happening. If you live in the city and you film a city block or a city boulevard, it's very easy to tell what sound needs to go where. You need some car sounds, you need traffic, you need people bustling down the streets, you need them yelling at each other when they bump into each other. Maybe construction going on a few blocks away, you need that echoing over. There's plenty of different ways to draw your audience into your scene. If you're in the middle of the woods, you can add some wood sounds, you can add leaves rustling, you can add trees blowing in the wind, you can add animals, you can add bugs, you can add anything. Really, the sky's the limit when it comes to sound design, and it really just matters what's perfect for your scene. So that's probably going to be it for me today. We'll talk about cleaning up audio and dialogue and mixing in a separate video. There's really only a few steps for that, but I don't really want to kind of bog down this video. There's already a lot of information in it. But basically, when I get my sound from a dialogue scene with actors in it, I take it back, I clean it up, I mix it into the soundscape, and we make sure everything is loud enough that you can hear it and mixed right so that it sounds clear. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe this video. We're really trying to up our subscriber count in the next few months, because we're really trying to get things rolling on this channel. So if you guys can, please share this video with your friends if you think they'd like it. Please post it on Facebook, please subscribe, and please just give it an overall like and a thumbs up and a comment down below. We love the interaction, we love talking to people, and we love what we're doing right now. So thank you guys so much. Tune in next week for another video, and I guess that's it for me. So have a great night.